Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the, weekly rankings, but also going game by game preview with my guy, Jim Coventry, of course, on the RotoWire YouTube station. We'll be talking about as many of the injuries as we know information for. Of course, we're doing this Wednesday morning, so a lot of the teams reveal that stuff later today and on throughout the week. Jim Coventry, of course, has your start sit questions every Sunday morning. It feels like 15 hours running through that, also on Sirius XM2 with Alan as well. So there's a lot of the start sit questions that we'll try to answer as best we can as we go through the game previews. But let's first start with, I think, going to be a very interesting AFC North battle between the Bengals and Ravens. Bengals were a buyer. Third time in the past 52 years, the Bengals made a trade at or around the trade deadline, acquiring Khalil Herbert to replace Zach Moss, who was placed on injured reserve. T. Higgins, who did not play last Sunday, again, early Thursday game. The assumption would be that T. Higgins will not play again. And Mike Gesicki ended up being the headliner for waiver wire perspective because T. Higgins was out. We know the Ravens defense, not very good. They also acquired a cornerback as well, too, in the corpse of Tre'Davious White. That won't help at all because White is completely busted. But, hey, at least they made a move at the deadline, unlike my Packers, who decided to trade away a player. Super fun stuff. I'm in a mood today, Jim, so help us out. What do we have with the Bengals and Ravens this go-around?
The first time they met a few weeks ago was thrilling. Massive points in that game. We saw Higgins, 2 touchdowns, 83 yards. He won't be there probably. Chase goes for a $193 and 2. Burrow throws from his 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. It was quite the spectacle. So with T. Higgins out, though, we have to realize the Ravens are going to play them very differently because, yeah, Gesicki's going to make a couple plays as he does when T. Higgins out. Gesicki's a big slot receiver. Not that Higgins plays a slot for whatever reason. He dropped a touchdown in week 1 when Higgins was out. If he caught that every week Higgins was out, Gesicki's eaten. But I think this is a much better matchup for the Ravens now with only one of those receivers to deal with. Yes, they're not a good defense. They will get some pressure on Burrow, but I think ultimately the Bengals are going to score points. I just don't think they can be nearly as explosive when they're a little more predictable to defend from a team that really knows them well.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I mean, from Ravens' perspective, they've been completely hot. Now, Lamar Jackson showed up on the injury report yesterday. The assumption is he will play. I think that's kind of the Ravens just doing not gamesmanship, but protecting Lamar Jackson in that instance. They did acquire Deontay Johnson last week. We had talked about on the show prior that we didn't assume Deontay Johnson would do a whole lot. Obviously, wasn't super involved in the game plan. That's more of a playoff kind of acquisition, getting Deontay Johnson to help out in those single coverage settings that Lamar Jackson often sees when it comes to playoff games. Is this a matchup, though, against this Bengals defense where maybe if you have Deontay Johnson, again, 4 teams on bye, would you end up playing him like in this kind of high-scoring game that the assumption would be?
I mean, I just don't know where the targets are coming from. I don't know how many targets are there for him. Is a best case scenario 4 targets? I mean, Rashad Bateman's played well for them. They don't have any reason to say, you know what, nice job, pat you on the back, you're done. I don't think that's happened. Obviously, Zay Flowers is the lead receiver. Isaiah likely may not play this game. I forgot to mention that. He looks like he's dinged up. We'll see what happens with that. But that said, he's not getting a lot of targets. But the 3 tight ends together, they get – so I just don't see a target path for Deontay Johnson. 4 targets maximum, and that's a maximum, might be 1 or 2. And he's not going to be the deep guy because he's not a deep downfield guy as it is. So I don't know that you could start him other than hope for a touchdown flex. I think that's about all. Now in this matchup, it'll be interesting because the last time, look, Derrick Henry's numbers ended up okay. 15 for 92 and a touchdown. It was a 51-yard run in overtime. He did very little. The Bengals, I have to rethink them. For whatever reason, they have been decent against the run. It's against the pass that they just have no answers at all. But they've been a decent run defense. I thought they would be like the worst in the league. Henry will be okay. Obviously, you put him as your running back 2 in terms of the rankings, like 1 to 30. He's number 2. He's always right there with Barkley at the top. But that said, he could get limited again. And he found the end zone. So just be prepared for that. It may not be a ceiling game, but he also could score 3 touchdowns. So you don't question it. You start Derrick Henry. But other than that, look, there are going to be no answers for Zay Flowers. Bateman crushed him for 58 and a touchdown. That was the game. Mark Andrews would have had a touchdown, but Lamar threw it too far to his side. Charlie Kohler likely scores twice. They're going to have their way through the air. There's nothing the Bengals could do. There's nothing they could cook up. It's going to be a real problem.
Mitchell might be back for the Ravens too. We had talked about on the Waiver Wire show yesterday. Jake was more interested in Keaton Mitchell than I am. I think even in deeper formats, you're looking for the Ray Davises, the Kamani Vidals. You and I, Jim, playing a lot of leagues where those guys were drafted and have never been dropped. So it's tough when you're looking for waiver wire options. I think with the way Derrick Henry is playing, you're just trotting Derrick Henry out there as much as you can. Stylistically, Keaton Mitchell probably provides more, even from a rushing perspective, than a Justice Hill would. But the Ravens have clearly shown they have intent to use Justice Hill for whatever the reason. I don't know why that would end up changing, even if Keaton Mitchell is back. So something to keep in mind from the Ravens' perspective. You good to move on to the next game?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so let's talk the Germany game here. I was going to say the London game. It's an overseas game, and hopefully one that you don't need to wake up for, between the Giants and Panthers. Giants favored by 6 in this international matchup. Darius Slayton is listed as questionable for it. Daniel Jones has been a popular streamer candidate if you're in super deep leagues, or Jordan Love would have been, I guess, the one quarterback that maybe you'd want to have not on bye. I guess Jameis Winston as well, too. So Tyrone Tracy feels like one of the more smash spots. You're likely going to see the debut of second-round pick Jonathan Brooks for the Panthers. They've mentioned that he will make his appearance. Now, I don't know what the game plan will mean, or if that hurts Chuba Hubbard at all, who's been dynamic for the past month and a half. I would assume the Panthers don't want to cut into the only good thing they have, but who knows? And then the Panthers did make a move, somehow scraping away a 4th-round pick from the dumb Cowboys for Jonathan Mingo. Whatever that deal was, we'll leave you with Jalen Coker and Leggett, and I guess Thielen if and when he returns this season for the Panthers. So how is this matchup going to shake up?
Yeah, you know what? The Giants are a weird team to look at in this one because, look, the Panthers are a bad defense. They're actually better against the pass than they are against the run. Teams are just able to run so successfully, and they don't really have to throw a whole lot. And usually in most weeks, you're beating them. And I think that's the formula here. Tyrone Tracy's gotten going. The run blocking hasn't been great, but it's been passable. And Tracy probably has another big game here. And I don't think the Giants have to throw the ball much. And I don't think Brian Daboll really wants to have games where we have to have Daniel Jones throwing unless he has to. So I think there's going to be a low volume passing here. Maybe Neighbors doesn't get those 11 targets. Maybe it's more like 6 or 7. Maybe there's a few for Wandale. And we don't know if Darius Slayton's going to play because he had the concussion and now they have to travel. We'll find that out. But my guess is less likely not, because they got to get him on an overseas plane. And I don't know if that's going to happen with the concussion protocol. That's a little detail in there.
Sure,
so I do think it's a big running game, but I think there's like 17 pass attempts here and not much more.
17 from the Giants. From the Panthers side of things, are they running too?
Yeah, well, they're going to fall behind, but it's going to be. But I think the Giants are going to control some clock here, and I think Brian Daboll's going to be acutely aware of that. I think they're going to bleed the clock. So I think the time of possession can go like 35, 37 minutes for the Giants. And then here's the problem for the Panthers. The Panthers' offensive line is decent. The Giants' pass rush has been no joke, and they have really put a lot of problems on opposing quarterbacks. And this is not a good matchup for Bryce Young because of that. Bryce Young, if he's under any pressure, it's a real problem because he is not an NFL caliber quarterback. So ultimately, you're hoping to get a few short passes to Tavian Sanders, but the Giants have been great against tight ends. You're looking for some dump off passes. Chuba Hubbard probably is the passing down back, probably. And if that's the case, if he splits with Jonathan Brooks, he probably gets it done as a receiver. I don't think you can play any receivers in this game because I maybe 85 yards passing is in the range of outcomes for Bryce Young in this game.
Over under sits at 41.5 points. I think these European matchups that we've seen this year have at least tilted close to. I know the Jets Vikings one would have been probably the highest over under of the European games, and that one didn't quite hit, but that was more of a slow first half, as the Jets have typically done, and that was the result for it. You're right. I mean, like, it's in deeper formats where you're considering a Jalen Coker anyway. I like Malik Neighbors you're playing. I guess maybe not Wandale Robinson in that instance too. It's really the Tyrone Tracy of the world, and I think you're still playing Chuba Hubbard, although I'm very curious this week, and more so next week, when you have Jonathan Brooks close to being ramped up to whatever full workload the Panthers want to have this season, and if that's negated, like you mentioned, with the Bryce Young factor at quarterback. So we'll have to see. Let's move over to the Patriots-Bears game. This should have a lot of weather implications. It's in Chicago. Bears favored by 6. Drake May, one of his first bigger tests of his career against a Bears defense that is pretty good. They've been vulnerable the past couple of weeks. I think Jaquan Brisker's multi-week absence due to concussion, and it sounds like he'll be out again this week too, is pretty troubling as well. And obviously Caleb Williams has not played great. Now the Cardinals ran all over the Bears. I would imagine if you're the Bears defense, you're going to say, well, let's just make sure Ramondre Stevenson doesn't do that same thing. Are they capable of actually stopping the rushing attack though?
I don't think they are. Now, this is crazy. The Patriots have a terrible offensive line. Ramondre Stevenson, he had touchdowns. He didn't get much on the ground, but it's a tougher matchup. The Bears are a team you want to run on. But because of the bad offensive line, I think Stevenson's yardage is he's not going off here, but he should be able to move the chains. He should have success there. He could score a touchdown. I think that's a play. I think Drake May is going to have success running as a quarterback here. And the connection with Hunter Henry has been outstanding. And the Chicago corners have been really good, especially Jalen Johnson. But you can attack them in the middle of the field. And they've had injuries at strong safety, as you were talking about earlier, at Brisker. Slot corner's been Kyler Gordon's missed some time. We'll see if he's going to come back. But I do think Hunter Henry gets going a bit here. He's a player at tight end. You got him in the top 12 tight ends right now because he's been good 4 straight weeks. I don't see that changing. Drake May runs. I don't think there's a big thing. It's a low-scoring game, Joe. This should be a real low-scoring game, I would think.
Yeah, this one actually a lower over-under than the Germany game between the Panthers, which I find a little bit interesting. I think that's part of the weather. Again, it might be soppy conditions. Maybe soapy would be kind of different. Wet can.
I'm going to talk here. I think we froze up.
Go ahead.
Joe, we froze up. Your pictures. Oh, good. You're clear now.
Okay.
Your face froze up. Now you're good. Let's go.
Oh, that's going to happen from time to time. It's just that kind of day, Jim, I think, unfortunately. So again, Patriots, Bears, not for much from a fantasy perspective, I think. So DJ Moore, we saw the highlight of him walking off the field mid-play. I think DJ Moore is good enough where you have to have him out there, unfortunately, every single week. Or are you going to say Christian Gonzalez and company? I mean, that's the one strong suit for the Patriots is their secondary. Do you try to not play DJ Moore if you have other options?
It's tough. In 4 of the last 5 games, it's 33 or fewer yards. I mean, it's not even flex level.
Right.
Not even flex level. And what's the other game in there? 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But 4 or 5 games, he has been fantasy useless. And so, look, I know that when you put a player in, you don't classify him as a wide receiver 1, 2, 3, or whatever. If you're trusting DJ Moore as a boom bust flex, I think you could rationalize that.
Okay.
But I don't think you can. I think if you only have 2 starting receivers in a flex, I don't think you start them in that scenario.
I'm with you too. And we have a couple of people in the chat asking about 10-team formats. In that instance where, again, Cedric Tillman's on bye this week, but in that instance where you could find a Cedric Tillman or a Jalen McMillan for the Buccaneers, talk about them in a second, these popular guys over the past 2 or 3 weeks, you could probably play any waiver wire fodder over the past 4 or 5 weeks that have been able to be picked up, I think, over a DJ Moore. That's sort of where we're at right now with the Bears offense. And I don't see how that changes in a wet game, in a game in which Caleb Williams, the past couple of weeks, have kind of struggled a bit. It's a roller coaster season for a rookie. Shocker. We've talked about this at the beginning of the season that's going to happen. And the Bears have ran into a bit of a tough spot where they're not playing teams that have only won 1 or 2 games, and they aren't playing good. That's not a surprise. So let's
real quick. Quick. Great spot for DeAndre Swift. Not that you need me to tell that he's been playing great, but this is another cake matchup against the run. The Patriots have lost so many people that were part of that run defense. So don't have any hesitation. Because sometimes people hear the Patriots and that reputation of a great run defense. That is not this. Go right ahead, Joe.
All right, let's go to the Bills-Colts game. Bills fair by 4, despite this being Indianapolis. We've heard that Joe Flacco will start at least another week. I think there's conflicting reports as to whether Flacco is your quarterback rest of season or if Anthony Richardson will eventually return. Shane Steichen has been at least non-committal when you actually hear him talk about the situation, but some people have ran with that and said Flacco is your starting quarterback rest of season. I would assume if you lose 2 more games as the Colts, you're out of the AFC South picture. You just play Anthony Richardson again, and I would assume they're going to lose this one too, given all the offensive line injuries that they seem to have.
Yeah, I love betting the Bills -4 in this game. I think they have a massive advantage. Ryan Kelly, the center of the Colts, looks like he's going on injured reserve. He's going to be out in this game for sure. Last week, left tackle Bernard Raymond was out. They've already lost their right guard, Will Freeze, a number of weeks back. This is one of the best lines in the league, and right now, this may not be that. And if that line is not up to that level, and we saw that Minnesota was able to really put some pressure on Flacco last week, well, the Bills are really underrated with their pressure because they get pressure from a lot of different guys. Nobody's like a complete game wrecker. Ed Oliver's a great run stopper, a little bit of pressure, but they all bring something. Therefore, they don't have to do anything crazy, and they're going to get pressure. So, yeah, Jonathan Taylor will be fine. The rushing matchup for him is not bad, so he'll give a nice, solid game for you. But I am concerned about the passing attack here because I think the Bills are going to cause them a lot of trouble.
One of the surprise injury inactives of Sunday was Amari Cooper, who had 3 straight limited practices last week with that wrist injury, then didn't play. Of course, it didn't really matter because the Dolphins are the Dolphins, but it's just kind of what's happening right now with Miami. I would assume that Amari Cooper does play this week, but this is part of doing the show early Wednesday mornings. We don't have the injury information out there yet. Assuming Amari Cooper does play, I've seen Shakir and Keon Coleman talked about a lot, either on low end, obviously streaming receiver sections or whatever else, assuming that the Bills are going to have offense. Have you seen anything to assess with some certainty how the Bills will look like in the few games Amari Cooper has been on that team?
Oh, yeah, and I was heavy on this. The second they traded for Cooper, I told everybody what happened. Defenses all year were compressing the field on the Bills because they had no worries that anybody could consistently beat them downfield. So everything was packed in. And you notice the Bills, those last 3 games where they got Cooper, their offense was not functioning at a high level. Well, as soon as they got Cooper, even though he played some snaps, teams had to account for a player that could tilt the defense. And you saw it. Coleman went off. Shakir had played better. And then last week with Cooper out, I told people in start sit stream, don't play Keon Coleman in that game. There's no Amari Cooper. They're going to play him differently. And they did. He did like very little. So Cooper should be back. That flips this whole offense, gives more room for James Cook in the running game. The receivers have more room. Now, as which receiver goes off on a given week, that's going to be really hard to say. At some point, Cooper is going to get more targets, so that's going to be an issue. But I think this could be a really high-octane offense going forward, and I really think this week we're going to see that.
Okay, cool. Anything else from the Colts side of things? Or are we good to move on to the next game?
No, Josh Downs, look, I love him.
Yeah.
And this could be a little rougher of a game for him. Teron Johnson's been back in the slot for a couple of weeks, which is a pretty good slot corner, but with the pressure they're going to bring, it could be a problem. A decent floor game, but it's hard to trust any other pass catcher right now.
Yeah, and I was going to say Michael Pittman with Rasul Douglas there too. That's another one that if it's Jalen Waddle or Michael Pittman, right? Like I've heard that question a whole lot. Maybe it's just the few places that I do these start set questions for. I don't want to play either one of those. Like it's not a great scenario. And we'll get to the Dolphins a little bit later on in the show. Let's talk Vikings and Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, you had ETN return last week and Tank Bigsby. That became a muddled mess. Jacksonville probably shouldn't have been anywhere close to that game with the Eagles, if not for an erroneous return to touchdown, which should have been called back. Right. I would assume that the Vikings kind of just stop in this one. And I was liking the Colts last week, at least at +5, and Minnesota pretty much handled business. They're a really well-coached team, Minnesota is, and we know Jacksonville is not. Is there any hope that the Jacksonville offense can generate enough points to keep up with Sam Darnold, Jefferson, and the like?
Yeah, I don't think so. They traded away their left tackle Cam Robinson before last week's game.
Minnesota.
Right, to Minnesota. And that was a line that was struggling as it was. The Vikings are going to bring some pressure. And they don't always get to the quarterback, but the looks they give, they make the quarterback speed the game up. And for, as you mentioned, a poorly coached Jacksonville offense, speeding them up is not a net positive. Now, Brian Thomas should be fine. He was playing hurt last week. I told people be careful in fantasy lineups. Fully healthy Brian Thomas, he's going to get it done one way or the other. Evan Ingram get a little bit done for you PPR-wise. But outside of that, I'm not trusting the running backs here. The run defense for the Vikings has been borderline elite, and we know that Tank Bigsby had a couple games, but we also know he's Tank Bigsby, and we've seen sometimes he plays to who he is. And so I'm not trusting anybody other than Brian Thomas and Evan Ingram on that side of the ball.
No Christian Kirk, and that was kind of the first introduction to that. Last year, during the 5 games that Kirk was out, Evan Ingram was insane. Was there any overreaction's not the right word. Was there any cadence or thought process that came away from last week's game, or weird result again with Jacksonville sort of getting that touchdown from a defense side and allowing them to stay in the game, that we could assume that this is not how the Jacksonville offense will look? I guess I'll reframe the question. No Christian Kirk. What should fantasy managers expect from the Jacksonville offense moving forward? And was last week a representation of that?
Well, Joe, the problem was they weren't using Christian Kirk hardly at all when they had him this year.
True, yeah.
And so I couldn't even give Evan Ingram the bump from last year because it's like, well, Kirk wasn't a factor. I can't explain it. That coaching staff is just ridiculously foolish. So, but Ingram got 10 targets. I'm going to give him that. He did get 10 targets here. They're playing in trail mode. They'll play in trail mode here. So Ingram's going to see those targets. But that offense, it was a little bit better last year. They've gotten worse, and so that's not helping the overall pie. I don't know that they're scoring more than 13 points in this game, so there's not going to be much to go around. And so, yeah, even Parker Washington did okay last week. He got some points when they were trailing late, but remember, don't expect that going forward because Christian Kirk in that role did nothing.
All right. Right, I'm with you. Let's move over to the Broncos-Chiefs game in AFC West battle. Of course, the Chiefs prevailed in overtime because Todd Bowles was a coward and didn't want to go for two, knowing that they're going to lose that game anyhow. I am bitter because I would have won a matchup if Travis Kelce had just not played overtime. Thanks, Todd Bowles, for being a coward once more. Let's from the Broncos side of things, the secondary is really good, but the Chiefs can just choose to run the ball, and will likely win the game. Bo Nix was a streaming level quarterback candidate last week. I would say I'm fading him this week if you need a quarterback option. And DeAndre Hopkins had a massive game, but again, this is against the Broncos secondary and Patrick Stam, which is pretty good. So how do you see this one faring?
First of all, DeAndre Hopkins, what I pointed out when they got him in the trade was DeAndre Hopkins, he may not be the player he was years ago, but he gets to the spot he needs to get to. His hands are ridiculous. It doesn't matter who's covering him because if you throw the ball to him, he's getting his iron grip mitts on those balls and he's catching it. And you're not stopping him. I don't care if it's like Darrelle Revis in his heyday. You can't stop the pitch and catch. And Mahomes is going to put that ball right in the exact spot where he needs to be. So that said, you mentioned they can run the ball. Now the Broncos, look, I said they would get beat up last week. The Ravens would bully them. The Broncos have a smaller front. They did trade away Baron Browning this week, one of their better pass rushers. But like you said, the Chiefs will get heavy that personnel. They get 2-3 tight ends on the field. They will bludgeon you. And it's a smaller Denver front. So that's going to be the game plan. And they'll throw when they need to. It'll be situationally. And so again, like you said, like the Monday night game, a little bit of Kelce, a little bit of DeAndre Hopkins. They don't put up the numbers they put up last week because I think they have more success on the ground than they had against Tampa.
Chiefs favored by 8 in this one. If you could tease that number down to 1 and then tease that Bills game, which again, I think they're -4, that'd be a +3 scenario. There's a couple of teaser options, I think, overall on this Week 10 slate. Again, with 4 teams on bye, 2 less games, you're sometimes looking for action, doing it a bit more unconventionally. I think the Chiefs win. I'm not sure they win by 8, but I feel very comfortable saying that they win. So that's the way I'm looking at things for this one.
I'll take those points, Joe. I'll take I don't even need a tease. It's 9. I'll take those. Divisional game. Andy Reid always takes the foot off the gas if they do have a lead in the second half. And divisional matchup. And these divisional matchups, that's a lot of points for a divisional game. And Denver's scrappy enough. And if the Chiefs are running that much, the clock is winding. Less opportunities to blow a team out. Bo Nix will run for a little bit. Don't expect a big passing game here. When he plays the better pass defense, he doesn't do really well. Right. Courtland Sutton, this isn't the best matchup for him. So you're not going to get that 100 yards. You might get 45 or 50 here. The running backs, I usually like for volume, Javonte Williams. This is not the best matchup for him.
Yeah, it's going to be tough overall. The over-under for this one at 41.5. So that's a similar cadence to the Panthers-Giants in Germany. It just seems a little bit bizarre, but I know the Broncos offense struggled at times. The Chiefs defense, pretty good. Let's go over to the NFC South and a team that has, thankfully, for at least fans of the NFL, given up, which is the Saints, who traded away Marshawn Lattimore to the Commanders. That's a very interesting trade from Washington's side of things, but getting multiple picks is great for a team that is completely capped out the way New Orleans is. The assumption is that Chris Olave will not play, having suffered a concussion again, second time in 3 weeks, if that's correct. And
yeah, that sounds right.
It's not quite to a level watch, but I would assume Chris Olave's status moving forward is going to be likely not present for the way the Saints have been playing things. And Derek Carr is back, but I'm surprised that the over-under for this game is at 46.5. I don't think the Saints offense is at all healthy enough to generate enough production, even though the Falcons defense has not been very good this season.
What we see with the Falcons is, yes, they don't have a good pass rush, but they'll blitz. And like I mentioned earlier with the Jaguars game and the Vikings, if you blitz, you speed up the other team. And Derek Carr does not perceive pressure well. He doesn't have much in the way of weapons at all now. Right. I mean, I have Alvin Kamara's a running back and a dump-off outlet for sure. But that said, the Falcons are a decent enough run defense where Kamara doesn't run for $150. He runs for 80 or 90. It's a good, solid game. But, yeah, I think Derek Carr is going to be in trouble because he's going to be seeing some blitzes and he doesn't have the weapons right now. So the Falcons are in a good spot. And then of course the Saints have imploded defensively. They can't stop the run at all. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier will take care of their business, but the Falcons have been balanced all year. Even when they have advantages in the run game, they don't run it 30, 40 times. They still throw a healthy amount of pass attempts there. Drake London had a hip pointer. It sounds like as of Wednesday early morning. He should be able to give it a go, but they should be able to score probably 27 points here without much of a problem. They're not aggressive enough on offense, I think, to score, over 30, but 27 is a very realistic one. They should win this one with some ease.
Yeah, a same game parlay that would be taking the Saints implied point total under and then factoring in some sort of alternate total passing yards for Kirk Cousins or even a passing touchdown. There's a lot to do with that one because I don't think the Saints have any shot at winning this. Maybe it's in New Orleans, and obviously that's a pretty bitter rivalry among the NFC side of things. That could be impactful, but I just think the Saints have lost all their teeth, and the roster injuries and cap situation have all kind of compiled to see where they're at right now, losing to the Panthers and becoming 2-7 in a very, very, very bad division. Going over to the Niners and Buccaneers game, this one in Tampa Bay. Bucs put up a good fight against the Chiefs. I could get mad at Todd Bowles for not going for 2 and winning that game. He should have, but they played much better than I would have thought with all the interest they have receiver. Now are kind of an interesting spot because one of these teams, Niners at 4-4, Buccaneers at 4-5, are kind of in a loser leaves town scenario, at least for major playoff ramifications. If the Niners lose, you're talking about possibly 1 or 2 games behind the Rams and Cardinals in the NFC West division. If the Buccaneers lose, they've already effectively given away the NFC South to the Falcons in their 2 losses, but also could be on the outside looking at that 6-7 spot in the NFC playoff standing. So I would assume Jalen McMillan plays. He was not a surprise scratch, but it was unlikely that we were assuming earlier this week he would not play against the Chiefs. Did not, of course. I think McMillan does play. And of course, it will be the Christian McCaffrey season debut is what we assume will occur. Jordan Mason still questionable with the shoulder injury. There's a lot of information on the Niners side that we'll get more from injury reports later this week. But how do you see this one shaping up?
I mean, the 49ers, the full expectation is they will be pretty healthy coming into this game offensively. Defensively, they're still getting people back. They're not going to get Javon Hargrave back, of course, but they're getting healthier defensively, but not this week. But I think defensively, here's the thing. You can run on the 49ers, and the Buccaneers have had a great run blocking line. They're going to try to run. I think the problem is they're going to fall behind. And if they have to pass, I think the running backs will catch the passes. And, realistically, if Fred Warner doesn't always shadow a tight end, this could be one of those weeks where the receivers don't scare anybody. And they say, you know what? Otten's been crushing people. Maybe we just put Fred Warner on him in the passing game and just blot him out.
Yep,
and that would happen. Fred Warner would have completely, if they do that, would completely blot him out. No guarantee they do. Jalen McMillan, you mentioned, look, as the number 1 guy in the offense, I have zero confidence in him. I don't think he could beat a number 1 corner at all, ever like that. I think Sterling Shepard's the guy to watch because he's so slippery. He just gets open. And Baker Mayfield, I was late in the game, but he gets him the ball. If McMillan plays, I go for 3 for 30, maybe. I think you can hope for 3 for 30. But if he's not Charvarius Ward, oh my gosh, good luck. It's going to be a real problem for him.
Yeah, that's fair. If Cade Otton is just completely negated by Fred Warner like he should be, and Jalen McMillan can't really do much against Charvarius Ward, then it's just Sterling Shepard against the entirety of a Niners offense that's going against a bad Buccaneers defense. This just feels like a complete smash of the 49ers then, right?
I think so. And the problem for the Buccaneers could be if they fall behind, as I expect they will, by double digits. I think that because here's the problem. Todd Bowles likes to blitz, right? Well, good luck blitzing the 49ers because they got the quick outlet to Debo. If McCaffrey's playing, hot read to him, they're going to take off for chunks of 15, 17 yards at a time off blitzes. So it's a bad styles versus fight matchup here. And Brock Purdy's been good against the blitz. So yeah. And then if the Buccaneers have to be one dimensional and the 49ers know they have to throw, now here comes Nick Bosa. And good luck. Baker Mayfield's been great. Liam Cohen's been great. Can't say enough about them. But yeah, this could get ugly.
George Kittle is not the same used tight end as Travis Kelce, but when the Buccaneers have struggled against tight ends, Travis Kelce went nuclear on Monday night. It's just something to consider. And I think as long as Brandon Ayuk is out, it's Debo, it's George Kittle, now McCaffrey into the mix. You're probably still playing Juwan Jennings in the instance that he's available and you have him, because I think there's a lot of offense on the Niners side, but not as attractive as, of course, a couple weeks ago, the scenario in which Debo and Brandon Ayuk were both out. That would have been far more fantasy relevant. I think the Niners kind of blow through the Buccaneers here. And I've been saying it now for the past couple of weeks, really since the Chris Godwin injury. I would not feel comfortable starting Baker Mayfield. You've made it work the past couple weeks if you've had to, and maybe you have to once again, but I think this is going to be a different matchup from the Niners side of things coming off a bye week. We'll have to see. Let's move over to the Steelers and Commanders, 2 teams that actually did make moves. Steelers were pretty aggressive, getting both Mike Williams and Preston Smith in respective trades. The Commanders made the big deal for Marshawn Lattimore on trade deadline. Commanders favored by 3 in this matchup, over under around 45, 46 points. You have Brian Robinson. We'll have to see what his status is entering this weekend. I don't know how much Mike Williams will end up playing in his first game with the Steelers, other than you assume he'll at least be out there. Is it just George Pickens, or knowing against this Commanders defense that outside of the last 2 weeks has been pretty vulnerable against the pass, could pose fantasy relevance for Freiermuth, Mike Williams, that kind of like?
I've really been discouraged with the usage of Pat Freiermuth. This is with Arthur Smith as a coach who has heavily emphasized the tight end position. Arthur Smith has coached very differently than we saw. I do think that the Steelers can have a lot of success running on the Commanders. The Commanders in spots are good against the run, but the Steelers had 300-yard games in a row from Najee Harris, and they've, even despite injuries on their offensive line, they've gotten very committed to that running game, and it's really been clicking well. I think this is lower scoring than a lot of people think. The over and under is 46 on this one. I definitely think that we're going to see George Pickens will get. Mike Sandstrow's been a good corner for the Commanders, but George Pickens is a different beast. So I do think Pickens gets at least 50 yards here, and you got your chance for 80 if he goes well and scoring a touchdown, of course. Other side of the ball, this is the first, in my mind, real test for Jaden Daniels. They played the Bears, and I get it. But the Bears held him to field goals. So, but he was hurt. So, I mean, we can't really, view that game right, because maybe Daniels was better. But the Steelers, they are going to bring pressure. Their corners, at least they have Joey Porter. Not the greatest corners, but the run game. Here's the thing, that Commanders offense has been successful because their run game works almost every week. The Steelers don't have to commit extra bodies, and they're a top 5 run defense. And so if they're in obvious passing situations and you got TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith coming at you, that's going to be a different beast. And it depends how they're going to bring the rush. Are they going to be smart enough to bring the rush and contain it and keep Daniels in the middle, which they need to do? Or are they going to forego their lanes and rush him more inside, and then they're going to give up big plays in the run game? That's what we're watching this one for. I think the Steelers have been doing this long enough to understand, and playing Lamar Jackson all those times, you got to hem him in the pocket.
Yeah, you said you're going to take the Broncos and the points. I'll gladly take the Steelers and the points. I think the Steelers win outright. This feels like actually, Jaden Daniels isn't this incredible prospect that we thought he was. And it's like, no, it's just the Steelers defense is really good. Yes. They have experience with this Lamar Jackson. They're not going to be stupid and leave Terry McLaurin on single coverage islands like it seems like every NFL team is doing. Like if you just put a safety over Terry McLaurin, that deep shot 50-yard pass play, which has been available like the past 5 weeks, won't be there. And then I think Jaden Daniels is a lesser quarterback. He has exceeded my expectations way more than I expected entering this year. I was a little bit more on the injury concerns for Jaden Daniels. We're going to see the real test here, and I think it's going to be a failure, not because Jaden Daniels is bad, but the Commanders are a flawed team and have played even more flawed teams throughout this time period. So I guess a bit of a spoiler. I do a love-hate video on the RotoWire YouTube channel, of course, where you're watching this now. Hopefully, I would assume Jaden Daniels might be on the hate list. Not that you can afford not to play him, but he's not getting you 30 fantasy points like he has been for the past couple weeks.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I'm excited to watch this game. But like you said, and I said it earlier, I'm going to repeat it real quickly. The offense is predicated on the run game and everything else opening up from that. And I don't think they run on the Steelers. And I think that Cliff Kingsbury's done a great job making things easier for Jaden Daniels. I don't think those easy levers are going to be there this week.
Let's move over to the Titans and Chargers side of things. Obviously, Calvin Ridley's been fine enough since the departure of DeAndre Hopkins. You're playing Tony Pollard. Otherwise, the Titans offense is just bad, and there's not a lot to discuss in my mind. We thought the Browns would obliterate the Chargers, and we looked very foolish because the Chargers absolutely ran roughshod on Jameis Winston and the Browns. They got some late production. Cedar Tillman looked fine, but the Chargers were the better team from the rip, and I was surprised by that. Now, if this was another team around that same range, I would assume they'd play down to their competition in the Titans. But for whatever the reason, Jim Harbaugh actually has his team played a level floor. Like the really good teams, the Chiefs of the world, are going to beat the Chargers because the Chargers are also a flawed team. But when they're going against a worse team, like we saw the Browns last week, and I think the Titans this week, they probably are in a smash spot. So J.K. Dobbins, for example, I don't know if you're playing and picking up and playing Quentin Johnston per se, but they've made explosive plays happen because Herbert is an awesome quarterback. How do you see the Chargers kind of moving the ball this week?
I do think their run game is inefficient. The Titans are a little better than I thought they'd be against the run. They're not lights out. They're closer to average. So I do think it's one of those games where Dobbins gets like 23 carries for about 70 yards, but he could find the end zone. Certainly he's been doing that. But I think they're going to move the chains enough. And like you said, Justin Herbert, they've been having him throw a little bit more. And I think that's where his advantage is here. L'Jarius Sneed's missed the last couple of games for the Titans. Not sure what his status is, but I don't know that it matters because there's no particular player he's looking to lock down. And Herbert, when they're getting a blown coverage, he's recognizing it right away, and he is ripping it and taking advantage of it. So whether it's Josh Palmer catching it, whether it's Quentin Johnson, we don't know who's going to catch the ball. Lad McConkey's been a great floor play, but I think overall, Justin Herbert has a decent enough fantasy day where if you're really struggling at quarterback and need a borderline top 12, I think he can get to that number 12 mark this week.
So I'm in a streaming quarterback conundrum. I could pick up Justin Herbert. I could start Drake May against the Bears again with that weather, or it would be something like a Bo Nix. Herbert is the clear streaming option of that group, right? Bo Nix, Herbert, and in this case, Drake May.
Yeah, I think so. We like the rushing floors of the other two quarterbacks, but the matchup are very bad for those other two quarterbacks.
All right, yeah. Jordan Love has killed me the past 2 weeks. I played Jordan Love over Drake May against my better judgment, but I was like, as a fantasy expert, I would look really stupid if I don't play my stud, but I knew that there's going to be weather problems and Jordan Love is banged up. I should just play Drake May. Frustrated. This is the NFC, so the point totals actually matter, and making dumb decisions like that affects me greatly. So this is fantasy at its conundrum, at its finest. I'm displaying it right now. Let's move over to the Jets Cardinals, a game that from a record perspective probably shouldn't matter. Jets sitting at 3-6, of course, got the big win last Thursday against the Texans. Cardinals, big win in their own right over the Bears and pretty dominating. So Jets defense has not been good against the run. We saw Joe Mixon kind of do the only bit of offense for the Texans last Thursday. So I think James Conner's in a good spot. It's the Marvin Harrisons of the world who you probably have to play against the Sauce Gardners that I'm not excited for. Garrett Wilson, of course, made a Hall of Fame level worthy catch. Devontae Adams finally had his good game. Offensively, an over-under sitting at 46 points. I'll gladly take the over in that regard.
You know, this is going to be an interesting game, though. Again, styles make fights, right? We say this all the time. And when we look at the Cardinals on offense, a lot of people like Greg Dortch in the preseason, and it made sense until we come to realize, the Cardinals are going to run 2 and 3 tight end sets, and they are going to run the ball, power running. Well, the Jets, like you said, they can't stop the run. And this team is designed. Look, that's what they did to Chicago. They knew it was a wounded run defense, and they just leaned into it. Conner goes 18 for $107. DeMercado goes off. Benson played well. This is more of the same. The Cardinals are going to run the ball. They're going to control it. Kyler Murray's not going to throw a lot. And game plan-wise, why would he? Why would you challenge Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter? That's a trio you don't want to mess with. And Marvin Harrison exactly hasn't been lights out for them anyway. And Michael Wilson and Dortch won't be on the field much. So I think they're going to run the ball 27, 28 times in this game. And they're going to grind clock. They'll have some scoring drives. The other side of the ball, the Jets, here's the thing. You could beat the Cardinals however you want, but they're better against the run than the pass, and they do have tactical advantages. But yet we saw in the first half of last week's game, Aaron Rodgers threw for 38 yards in the first half. Now in the second half, it worked out, but we don't know what to expect from this offense week to week. The Cardinals are going to send some pressure, and Rodgers hasn't been good under pressure, but the receivers have such a big advantage. You'd have to think that the Jets should be able to keep up on the scoreboard and maybe even do better. But man, we just don't know what we're going to see from them because they are nothing resembling consistency.
It's just a general question, but one I've been seeing quite a bit across all of our various platforms. Breece Hall and X thing for X player. Overall, the idea is somebody's trading away Breece Hall because they've been unhappy with the investment or return. Are you trying to acquire Breece Hall, or are you more so saying people who have him, whatever you're giving up, whatever you're including him in trades for, will not be worth it? Because Breece Hall was going to be at least fine enough fantasy-wise.
I mean, I was heavily invested in Breece Hall this year, and there's nothing that I've seen conclusively that lets me think that he is going to be better than what he is. And that's a 10 to 15 PPR points in most games. That's what he is. Now, he hasn't found the end zone much, so that's certainly hurt, and he will find the end zone some weeks. I don't think he's that 25 point per game guy at any point consistently going forward. He might get one, he might get two of those. Good luck knowing when they are. I think if you're paying up thinking you're going to have the second half explosion, I have seen nothing that gives me any confidence this offense is going to do anything to maximize their superstar player.
Let's go to another NFC East divisional matchup. This one, Eagles traveling to Dallas around 4:30, I guess 5:30 Eastern time. This matchup lost a lot of teeth. Dak Prescott out, placed on injured reserve. You had CeeDee Lamb banged up. The Cowboys sitting at 3-5 might as well effectively have their postseason opportunities done. We'll see for certain. Cooper Rush, I think, is actually a pretty good backup in the NFL. But if I'm the Cowboys giving up a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance, you would assume that's something you want to consider, if not to realize that asset for somebody else. It's the CeeDee Lamb question that I have first. We'll get to the Eagles in a second. And I think the idea would be play everyone. Cooper Rush has done primarily well with CeeDee Lamb when the two have been together. When Cooper Rush came in for Dak Prescott, it felt like he targeted him every single time until literally Lamb's shoulder could not hold up anymore. So provided CeeDee Lamb does play, we don't know yet his status, and we'll likely not know, I would assume, until Friday. But provided Lamb does play, are you still expecting premium level performance from him?
Look, CeeDee Lamb had the one big game 2 weeks ago. He hasn't been the fantasy player we wanted. Cooper Rush had the advantage of nobody game plan for him because he came in for an injured Dak Prescott, and it was basically they were in chase mode as it was. Here's the problem. We think of Cooper Rush in 2022 when he leads the team to a 5-1 record. Well, in those games, he threw some touchdowns, but his yardage was around 200 yards per game. It wasn't much, but that was behind a very good Dallas offensive line. This offensive line is way below average. The tackles are bad. The center's a rookie and not playing well. So Cooper Rush is not in the same situation he was. They're playing an Eagles defense that has gotten better almost every week. They had some mental breakdowns last week. They didn't know how to play with a lead, whatever. But it's been a great defense. And that Dallas offensive line should be under siege. And Lamb will get some underneath work. And I don't know how the shoulder, how much hurt it is.
Right.
I'm going to put down Lamb 7 catches for like 55 yards, and that's it. And I don't think they're getting in the end zone.
Yeah, and the other part with Cooper Rush when he was the starting quarterback before was that the rushing attack was really good. You had Zeke and Tony Pollard at that point, along with that offense line that's really good. Rico Dowdle, Dalvin Cook, and Zeke are far from that. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of junk time production. I would actually say Lamb is going to get like 10 catches for 102 yards. The Cowboys will lose by 28. Like that's the scenario in which I see this kind of happening. Because go ahead.
And real quick, Joe, it would have happened that way if Philadelphia didn't do that against Jacksonville. They had learned. I know they learned from that last week. I know when they had a 23-0 lead and they coughed it. I know they're talking in meetings this week about how to play with a lead. So if it wasn't the week after they blew a lead by just playing loose, I don't think the week after they're going to do that again.
All right. So you're the older one of us by a very little bit, Jim. You're very young at heart. Nice. I'm going to give you my old guy take right here because we only have 2 games left and I am feeling a little bit feisty. The backwards hurdle is stupid, and I don't think we need to have that shown too much on the TV. That literally did nothing. I can jump backwards over something accidentally. That was not a strategic decision. Saquon Barkley was caught midair, and that is not one of the greatest jukes or moves all time. Sue me if you think that's that bad of a take. There was a million other better plays that happened last week, and I don't really care. So I'm going to be the Grinch on the Saquon Barkley love train, but that's where I'm at with my hot take.
I respect it, but the idea he had the vision to see that before it happened and to jump at the right time. To me, it just showed an incredible level of field vision and spatial awareness. To me, it was more than the jump. It was that this level of athleticism in a league full of amazing athletic players, Barkley could do things that few others can.
A lot of people can jump backwards over a player.
It wasn't the jumping backwards. It wasn't the jumping backwards. It was the spatial awareness of he wasn't even facing that direction, and he knew exactly when and at what level to jump. It was a combination of things. And when you watch it, you're like, okay, but to think about what went into that in real time, that's what made it special.
I don't think it's special. I think it was a preservation type of move. Like, oh crap, my back is here. I don't want to get speared. I'm just going to kind of jump and hope that it doesn't get hurt. And Jacksonville being Jacksonville gets to be embarrassed, which is great. You'll see the highlight for a long time. It's not that cool a play. I will get off my lawn soon enough, or at least I'll have one of those takes. So let's move over to, I think 2 games that are impactful from different ways. So Lions traveling to the Texans, of course. Lions annihilated my Packers in rainy Lambeau Field. Green Bay continues to look like the most finesse team ever. That's been a McCarthy staple now for the past 15 years. That's carried over. You have Jameson Williams returning from suspension for the Lions offense. You have Jared Goff, who might not ever have to attempt to tap the pass again more than 5 yards. It seems like the way that Lions offense is going. Defense acquires Zadarius Smith. That was the most obvious move that has been predicated now for the past 2 or 3 weeks. And then the Texans still no Nico Collins. He, I think, is eligible to return next week. Stephon Diggs, of course, done for the season.
This week. They're hoping this week.
Oh, Nico can return this week. Oh, well, that might change things if Nico does return offensively. I assume the Lions are just going to dominate because they're the best team or the second best team in the NFL. Am I just doomsdaying from an NFC North perspective? Are the Lions actually vulnerable in some degree?
I mean, their offensive line is where they gain the advantage. The Texans can. Will Anderson looked like he's probably less than 100% after that ankle sprain from last Thursday. He probably is 100. That's going to hurt them because they will send pressure. They really need their two outside guys to provide that pressure, and I just don't think they're going to get through that line a whole lot. So yeah, you're right. It's the running game for the Lions should be great here, and you're right. They're going to continue to roll on that, and they're good covering receivers. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, they could move him in. They plays outside. He plays the slot, but when he's in the slot, he's going to probably crush them a bit. So that said, Sam Laporta, not a great matchup. Texas have been very good against tight ends, but you're right. They'll run the ball. They'll control the clock. Other side of the ball, look, the Laramie Tunsil, the left tackle for Houston, he used to be great. He's a turnstile now. I don't know what happened. He's a turnstile. And in the Lions, they like to blitz and play man coverage. And here's the thing. CJ Stroud's going to have to withstand the blitz because they normally see teams with too high shell and they're struggling with that. If they've got Tank Dell in man coverage, he could win big in this game. And Nico Collins, of course, if he's back, Superman there. So it's all a matter if they could deal with the blitz the Lions are probably going to bring. That's the key to the game. I think they'll be hit and miss with that. There will be some big plays. I'm love Collins always. I think Tank Dell is going to have a game here. But again, how many plays are they going to run? Because the Lions are going to drain the clock.
Yeah, the over-under at 49 would tell me that Nico Collins does make a return. And you're right. You're pointing down as if that the idea would be you take the under, and I would agree. I think if Nico is back, that offense is completely different. That helps Tank Dell become more fantasy relevant. If the Texans are passing to keep up, which I think they will, that's important too. You're playing Joe Mixon every time, but I think Nico Collins is actually going to be a major factor as to whether or not this game is competitive.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Just remember with Tank Dell, Tank Dell will thrive when it's man coverage. We saw even this year when the too high shell goes up, he's not teams know to expect him now. Yep. Collins beats it no matter what because Collins doesn't win over it. Collins wins behind the linebackers and in front of the safeties. Yep. They drill the ball to him under, and then he's big and fast, and he can find the gaps, and then he shreds the gaps. So he is like that unique outlier. But this, like I said earlier, for Dell matchup-wise, this is a great matchup because there will be big play potential for him.
Final Week 10 game here. We have a Monday night thriller. Kinda. Dolphins traveling to Los Angeles to face the Rams, who are suddenly hot now, having won 2 consecutive games. Cooper Kupp is back. You'd assume Puka Nacua will not punch somebody with a helmet on, and therefore will actually play. That also killed me as well, too. I didn't start him in his return because there's supposed to be limited snaps. And then I did start him in the week against the Seahawks. And of course, he's out by the second quarter because he's stupid. So love Puka Nacua. You've been super fun for me fantasy-wise this year. Thanks for everything. Not. Rams favored by 2.5 points. Dolphins seem like they've not given up is the wrong word. They have a lot of tools. I mean, you have the big names, Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill, and yet I feel like the Rams are just kind of going to run through them because the Dolphins have this malaise right now where they're not a winning team. Like they have winning players, they have good players, but they are not a winning team. Am I too far off base with this?
No, you're not. Mike McDaniel looked like a genius his first year, and then he got figured out a little bit. In the second year, the definition of genius for me is your counterpunch. And in that second year, he was doing those half-field motions, but then it was so good, other teams stole it, and they practiced against it on their own, and he's had no counterpunch since. So, yeah, Jonnu Smith is seeing more targets than Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. That's your number one problem. Devon Achane's a great player. He should not be the engine of the offense. It needs to be your 2 speedy star receivers, and it's not. Don't know what the disconnect is, but it's there, and it's not changing because they could have changed it, and they haven't done that. So that's a big problem there. Other side of the ball, the Rams. This is a great matchup. The Dolphins have lost a lot of talent, injuries, and
especially pass rushers. Yep.
Yes. and even Jalen Ramsey. Well, the way Cup and Nakua are used as in
Exactly.
tight formations, on angled routes, this is like a normal
Choice routes,
receiving.
timing routes. Like you could be as good at corners as you want, and you could know the Rams and have played against that in practice, and it's still a tough thing to do. I mean, like the concept of Jalen Ramsey as a good corner is totally fine, but execution against this offense that the Rams have, the Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Nakua connection, that's impossible to do even for the best corners, I feel like.
It is. So it's a no man's land, and this is one that the Dolphins are not equipped to handle. And then Kyron Williams, this is a good matchup for him. And the Dolphins can't commit bodies to the run because they got to deal with even DeMarcus Robinson is a number 3. So yeah, I think the Rams at home move the ball at will here. The Dolphins are hopeful to get some garbage time, but again, I can't count on that. They have not looked like an overall good offense. Achane playing great, and he's going to keep getting receiving work, so he's great. Jonnu Smith, look, if you're scraping for a tight end, he's been decent the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, David Njoku, Tucker Kraft on bye week, as well as a couple others. That's the one position that I think there's a lot of attrition at. Mike Gesicki, if you didn't win that sweepstakes, and again, T. Higgins likely not playing for the Bengals, you want to have Gesicki out there. I would play Jonnu Smith over Pat Frymuth at this point. Like, there's a couple of those from a weekly ranking perspective. Again, you do a lot of that weekly ranking stuff Sunday morning from a show perspective. I'm sure a lot of people will be able to target their questions for you. Real quick, anywhere that people want to ask more questions before the start of the week here, from a fantasy perspective, where can they find you at, Jim?
Yeah, you can hit me up at Jim Coventry NFL on the X. And like Joe said, Sunday morning, the start sit show is at 11 Eastern. I will tag that link to my X profile on like Saturday, so you could catch that there if you want to go. And if you like, I have 1,100 people in there now. So if you have a question, you want to get to the front of the line, the super chat function is available. That skips the line for you.
Yeah, that's true. And then rotowire.com/try. You see the link below, 48-hour access to the site. You can get a lot of the waiver wire pickups, although there's not a whole lot there. You could see my big betting sheet, which will be posting later today. A lot of teaser recommendations. If you haven't already caught on to what we're doing in the show, there'll be a few of those things too. You can find me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. We're back in next Wednesday talking more football. Best of luck to everyone's lineups.